What is up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. I post photography related content every single Monday, so if you liked this video, go and check out my other videos and subscribe to this channel to see more like it every single Monday. So today's video is going to be about the Capture Photo Festival of April 2021. Now, the Capture Photo Fest has this thing where they put up different photographs from local artists on billboards as a way of exposing the public to art, which we love that in theory. But in April of 2021, this Capture Photo Fest underwent a bit of a scandal, and a situation developed from it that probably isn't worth talking about a year later, but that I found very interesting at the time, and I had intended to make a video about it, but I just had way too many thoughts to put into words, and I was also pretty new at YouTube, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to make something that was like, would touch on all of the things that we're gonna touch on in this video, but now, I do want to make it, and I am ready to touch on all of these things. So buckle up, because this story is about as wild as it gets with the fine art establishment in Vancouver, British Columbia. So let's get into it. On April 1st of 2021, 7 billboards that were positioned along the Arbutus Greenway in Kitsilano were covered up. And this was shortly after they had been put up 2 days earlier on March 30th of 2021. So they didn't have a ton of longevity. These billboards featured artwork by Vancouver-based artist Shearer, and they were covered up in response to a public outcry regarding the suitability of these works for a public art installation. So, you might be curious, what was on the billboards? Well, it was pictures of people sleeping in public places. 2 of them were in their cars, 2 of them you couldn't really tell, it was like a close-up on their face. One guy was like lying down in the grass. Some of the people were unclothed, some of them were having hands prodding at them, but I want you to look at these images and just, what do you think? Because when I look at these images, I immediately think, oh my god, those look like dead people. And apparently, that is what the public also thought. They look like corpses. They look like dead people. They look like they are people who have died suddenly in their cars or on the street, and for whatever reason, somebody has thought to photograph them, and somehow that photograph has wound up on a billboard. I would be very confused seeing these images, and apparently a lot of people were very confused seeing these images. And the location of these images is on this like multimodal pathway for transportation. So you see these when you're out walking your dog, or you see these when you're biking to work, you see these when you're taking your family on a walk to the park. They are just these big billboards of dead people. So this alone is like a pretty big oversight. You know, the fact that nobody flagged that the difference between sleep and death in a photograph is very nominal, and it's usually based on context, and the context of someone sleeping is a bed. So somebody who is not sleeping in a bed could very easily look like a dead body in a photograph if you're not placing that photograph in specific context that tells the viewer, no, this person isn't dead. We're photographing people who are asleep. That on its own is like an oversight for sure, but that is not what makes this so bad, because there's a context here that makes this even worse. And that context is unfortunately the toxic drug supply crisis. So for the last 10 years, Vancouver, like many cities in North America, has been afflicted by a crisis of drug supply toxicity. And this has been killing off people by the thousands and is worsening every year. In 2017, the provincial government of British Columbia declared a state of emergency in response to this crisis. That is the scale at which people are dying. We've remained in a state of emergency ever since, with arguably very little being done to actually treat it like an emergency, but that's a whole other video, and it's not one I'm going to make on my channel. But since the declaration of the COVID-19 pandemic back in 2020, the rate of overdose and death has increased steadily and has surpassed all-time historic heights recently in the month of April. And this crisis of drug supply toxicity is running in tandem with an increasing rate of addiction, which is pretty much a direct result from the COVID-19 pandemic, and also economic uncertainty and recession and suppressed wages, and an economic system that makes life basically hell for the bottom 20% of people, and their only escape from that hell is the occasional artificial escape provided by recreational drug use, and now that is literally killing people in the streets. And last month, for example, 165 people in British Columbia died of drug poisoning, and that's just over 5 deaths per day, and 15% of those deaths occur in public places, on sidewalks, and in vehicles, and on benches. And the public who interacts with these spaces regularly is now exposed to this level of mass death. Everybody who I know in Vancouver has been exposed to the overdose crisis on some personal level, whether it's a family member or a friend or a neighbor or a roommate who has succumbed to overdose. Almost like everybody I know knows somebody who has died, right? And it's an extremely common sight also to see people slumped over in chairs on buses and on street corners. And what can you do? You can rouse them and ask if they're okay, and maybe they rouse and they say, yeah, I'm fine. But maybe they don't. And then what do, right? It's this situation that makes the entire city feel completely helpless, and we're gripped by it, absolutely gripped by it. It's gripping and tearing at that human need to do something and knowing that there's absolutely nothing you can do. Like one time, for example, there was a guy who was like passed out. I thought he could be dead, so I called 911, and the police showed up and roused him, and he was alive. And so then they handcuffed him and put him in the back of a police cruiser and took him away. And I was like, oh, okay, that didn't really solve the problem at all. It just made the problem a lot worse for that one guy. Yeah, we can vote for a more caring city council, and we can carry naloxone kits and stay sober and vigilant around friends who are using, but all of those things pale in comparison to the actual scope of the crisis, and there's nothing that we as individuals can do to combat it at scale. It's a very depressing situation, and it's one that most Vancouverites are familiar with. I'm sure if you're living in Vancouver, you know exactly this experience of being distraught, seeing people passed out in the streets and having very, very little that you can do about it. And so with all of that context in mind, looking at these billboards that depict people slumped over in public places apparently dead, yeah, this kind of imagery can be extremely disturbing to people, especially people who have recently lost friends, loved ones, neighbors, or roommates to the opioid crisis, right? If your cousin had been discovered in a car last week having overdosed on whatever, and then you see this billboard that's like a guy slumped over in a car, that could be pretty disturbing, right? And the location of these billboards is the Greenway. It's a place where people walk their dogs or spend time with their family or bike to work, where they might not want to be exposed to this kind of upsetting imagery, especially not if it's taking them off guard, which it completely would be blown up on a billboard on the Greenway, right? So with all of that in mind, looking at these billboards and the images they depict, it's not just an oversight of how similar sleep and death look in photographs, it's an admission that those who are in charge of arranging this exhibit, those in their ivory towers in the world of fine art, are so far removed from the actual character of this city that they didn't even notice the uncanny resemblance between these sleeping figures and the figures that we see slumped over the streets in public spaces, because they're not accessing those public spaces as often as the public. They skip over these sites as they Uber between work and fine restaurants and gallery openings. They're so removed from the public sphere that they don't actually understand what's going on in it. And it's this out of touchness, this tone deafness that really made me want to make this video. I'm not just making it to crap on an art institution's attempt at bringing fine art into public life. I am wanting to really punch up at this fine art establishment that is so far removed from public life in the city, from the life that working class people experience, that they did not even think about how these billboards could have been interpreted. So all that said, this on its own is pretty ridiculous, but there's more to this story, okay? There's way more to it. So let's talk about the artist, Stephen Shearer. So Stephen Shearer is the artist credited for these billboards. And on every single website that talks about these billboards and how they got taken down, it's always crediting Stephen Shearer as the artist. So when I first read the artist's statement about these works, which I will read to you in a second, I did feel a pang of like, aw, that's too bad. That's a cool idea and for a series of photographs, and it's too bad that they got covered up so quickly, right? It's a cool idea. I'll read it to you now. Okay, so here's the artist's statement. The reclining and sleeping figures presented on Shearer's billboards recall the poses found in religious paintings and sculpture, where bodies appear to be in states of ecstasy or seem to defy gravity, as if they are floating, having been released from their earthly bonds by virtue of giving way to their physical desire for sleep. These figures have unintentionally invited passers-by to observe them at a heightened level of vulnerability and intimacy. Okay, yeah, that's cool. We love parallels between classical art and modern compositions. I think that's kind of neat. Then I kept reading this article about this installation, and I became extremely confused. So you would think that the artist that the Capture Photo Festival chose to feature on billboards would be a photographer, or at least somebody who dabbles. But no, according to his bio on the Capture Photo Fest website, he works primarily in painting, as well as drawing, sculpture, and collaged found photography. found photography. So what does that mean? Well, here's a quote from his bio, all right? He regularly conducts internet image searches and has created an archive of over 63,000 images, creating a visual lexicon around portraiture and the human form. Interesting. He conducts Google searches. So the bio continues. The images presented here are appropriated from Shearer's personal archive and include both photographs purchased through eBay as well as those found in print and online. What? So these photos of these billboards weren't taken by Shearer, even though he's credited as the artist in every single one? You mean they were found? They were bought from eBay and found online? Like, what? That's unreal to me. That is unreal to me. And nowhere can I find the names of the actual photographers, the actual artists who made these works, who took these images. They're not anywhere. I looked. I could not find a single reference to whose photos these actually were. So imagine you're an artist, you're selling some of your photos. Like I sell photos on Shutterstock, and I've talked about that on my channel before. I would never really expect somebody to buy one of those photos off of Shutterstock and then work for over a year with a photography festival in some foreign city on the other side of the planet and have that my photo wind up on a billboard credited to some old white guy. I would maybe, yeah, apparently it can happen. Apparently it does happen. But that would just never be my thought process going into selling a photo on Shutterstock. And so these people who are selling their photos on eBay, I bet you they didn't expect that their photos would wind up on billboards along the Arbutus Greenway credited to some guy. Like, what? I find that wild, dude. I find that wild. And also, like, say you're a struggling artist and you took this photo and you sold it because you're a struggling artist and you need some money. Well, now you know that it's not your art that's holding you back, because your art apparently is good enough to be on billboards. It's the fact that you're not Steven Shearer that's holding you back, that you're not like some old white guy in the fine art establishment. It's you that is devaluing your art. Like, what? What kind of, There's so much about this that I just do not like. So, okay, I do want to act in good faith. So I will give you a good faith interpretation of this and show you the right way to display a collection of images of people sleeping. These are some photos of an installation by Shearer in a gallery. And this is part of the same collection. These are all images of people sleeping and vulnerability and parallels to religious art. I like this. I get this. I understand this. This is collage, right? A collage is a collection of images, maybe of fragments, right? Not one single image on a billboard. When you do a photo collage, you want to have multiple images in it. If you just have one image, then you're just stealing another person's artwork. Anyway, so the images that were featured on the billboards were taken from this collage. And when you have this collage, this set of images all together, yeah, I think that's a fair use of those images. That shows off the fact that he's put the work into compiling this archive of tens of thousands of images. The act of compiling those pieces and putting them all together as one whole is art. I do totally think that this is a legitimate way to use those images and that he is legitimately the artist of this piece. And also, this is displayed in context, right? So you have a statement there and you're in a gallery, so you know to read the statement, and you can read that it says, oh, these people are sleeping and, you know, vulnerability and whatever, right? You know that it's not a collection of pictures of dead people because you can just read the blurb. And even if it were a collection of pictures of dead people, you have taken yourself to a gallery where you're expecting to see art that could potentially challenge you emotionally. And oftentimes in galleries even, there are warnings like the next room contains subject matter that may be disturbing for some audiences, so moderate yourselves appropriately, right? I've seen that in tons of galleries. It's a common thing. It's a common practice. And it's good because it prevents people from being exposed to things that may dredge up memories that are troubling, that they don't want to think about on a nice day out to the art gallery, right? Super fair. That's why we have content warnings. So displaying these images in the context of a collage in the greater context of an art gallery, I think is a perfectly appropriate. I have absolutely nothing negative to say about that. I think it's cool. If I saw this in a gallery, I would stop and go, just like that. I would never be making a long video on the topic. But that's not what they did. They took individual images from this collage, blew them up the size of billboards, and then put them with pretty much no context on the Arbutus Greenway. And okay, they did have context, for sure. There was a little plaque, apparently, explaining the artist's intention in creating these works, which is great if you have time to stop and read the plaque, but it was so tiny, and like, look at these images. Do you see a plaque that explains the artist's intentions? What catches your eye about this image? Is it like, oh, the image and then, oh, the plaque? No, I don't see a plaque in these images. This one I do. And maybe, yeah, I would be inclined to read it if I had time, but if not, I would just look at this billboard and be like, what the hell? I would think it was like a PSA from the government, like, against toxic drug supply, you know? Like those ones that are like, oh, your cousin could be an addict, or oh, your friend could be an addict. Like, I would think it was one of those PSAs. Like, oh, this could be your cousin. Like, anyway, and then, okay, one more aspect that I don't want to dwell on, like, too much, but Shearer is an older white guy, and I just really hate to think that these photos could have been created by artists who lack the resources or institutional and social capital / privilege that Shearer has that would have gotten their art onto the billboard as their art. And because they lack those things, instead their art is on the billboard credited to Shearer. He's literally taking the work of less privileged people, claiming it as its own, slapping it on a billboard, and profiting off of it. I don't like to think about that. I don't know if that's true, but I can assume that not all of these photos were taken by people who were well-established gallerists. Anyway, so this whole thing is pretty stupid. But along this same angle of privilege, I do want to question the logic of the Capture Photo Festival choosing to feature an artist who is already internationally acclaimed, has exhibited extensively all over the world, has an established decades-long career, and isn't a photographer. Surely there are photographers out there who don't already benefit immensely from social and institutional privilege who would be worth featuring, especially photographers who take photos, like they take their own photos. You'd think, I don't know. Why are these billboards being used to reinforce existing social hierarchies in the fine art world? Like, that's so lame. I don't know. I know I'm getting like worked up. I don't know why I feel so strongly about this situation. I've described a few reasons. I don't know if my outrage is justified. That's the whole video. That's all I had to talk about. Hopefully you found this video entertaining. If you did, you can leave a like, or you can subscribe, or you can do both. I mean, you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. Tell me if you disagree with my take, if you agree with parts of it, if you think a collage is one photo blown up on a billboard that you bought off eBay. Let me know. And next week, I might be putting out a video, or I might not. I don't know. We'll see. I am going to go to Cancun, which is awesome. There will be a Cancun-related video in the near future. I just don't know if it'll be next week or the week after. It really depends on how much time I have to put together a video and also how many good pictures I take. We'll see. So I'll either see you guys next week or the week after. But regardless, in the meantime, I would like you guys to stay sharp and don't forget to keep shooting. Bye, guys.